go over a ledge, that's sort of hard.
Yep. Hey, if while you're talking I go, will they turn my mic down?
I don't know.
I could game the system.
Can we fake feedback?
Myself? Me, myself?
Yes.
Okay, like 5 seconds.
All right.
And you're live.
All right. Welcome to the Anything But Ethernet NADA wrap-up. Being NADACon, there are some NADA setups running in the next room.
That are not a done.
Yeah, the Anything But Ethernet contest was supposed to take place during yesterday and today as people set up their creations and finished their troubleshooting and move data across them. And then I was going to walk by and count the hops and apply bonuses as necessary and figure out whose was the coolest. One's still in progress, and one had a piece of itself stolen overnight. So while those problems are worked out, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Anything But Ethernet and take questions and hopefully inspire some of you to compete next year because, as I mentioned, there are 2 setups running in the next room being prepared for this contest, and I would love to see 10 next year. They don't have to be huge. So.
Nor do they have to be heavy. Just that was the weight of the ones that came this year.
Yeah, they.
Setup that you're speaking on.
Yes, exactly.
Very heavy.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of feedback, I'm not faking that.
And I'm not sure my mic is working, but I'm not particularly concerned.
Anyway, so was that DEF CON 9 or 10?
10.
10. We were driving because I'm not fond of I like airplanes, you know, zoom, zoom through the sky is cool. I like the airline industry. So we were driving to Las Vegas. It's a long drive. And we were talking, me about telco, because that's where I work, and him about...
Data, as best as can be described. Ethernet, primarily.
Because that's where he works. And we were realizing that there's so much more to each other's professions and specialties than either of us realized before that. Specifically that, you know, a lot of the datacom world has no idea what actually goes on. You know, when they order a T1 between like here and, you know, San Diego or something, I think somewhere in their head there's this picture of like a pair of wires going all the way there. They don't realize.
Okay, we now have a wireless link failure. We're recovering.
Yeah. Speaking of wires going all over the place, they don't realize that there is, you know, all this stuff happening below the layer of their circuit. That T1 is packed onto, you know, packed into a DS3 with 27 other T1s, and then that DS3 is packed into an OC48 with 47 other DS3s, and that OC48 may bounce through an OC192 on the way out to San Diego. But all of this is bit for bit transparent and millisecond for millisecond transparent in a timing way, so you don't see it. You twiddle the line on this T1 and it twiddles in San Diego. You don't know. It doesn't show up in a trace route or anything. And so all these data people don't really have an understanding of what goes on in the telco world. And I wanted to change that. And so, and you know, of course, there's...
At some point during the extremely long trip, because when we say we were driving out to DEF CON, a more accurate way to say it is we were driving straight out to DEF CON,
Yes.
which was what, roughly
31 hours, not including stops.
Yes.
So you figured 32 and a half if you count all the, you know, gas and restaurants and things like that.
And I blurted out some silly line like, there ought to be a contest about doing anything except Ethernet.
And it kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Boy, that sounds cool. Yeah, we could get Token Ring and ArcNet and T1s and ATM.
And we had no idea, none, what was going to happen 3 years into the contest.
Yeah, so the first year, it was announced on the website for NADACon 1, and there was exactly one entry. So it won, and it lost, and it took all the places and everything. And it was IP over voice. A couple guys hacked together some scripts in the car on the way here from Pittsburgh,
I
And
believe so.
there aren't very good records of this. I'm not entirely sure who they were. But the idea was that they would take these two laptops with Linux and some, speech recognition and synthesis and speakers and microphones and set them next to each other, and they would talk back and forth and exchange data. It didn't work real well. But more specifically, it was not just IP over voice, it was IP over profanity. Which I will not repeat here, but it's really priceless. If there are audio archives from the first year, you owe it to yourself to dig up the talent show, because that was when it was thrown into. I said, well, it's kind of a talent, whatever, do it during the talent show.
The entire system was in fact wired into the room's PA system, which was amusing by itself to start with, but it got worse because the speech recognition side of it kept on mistaking people in the room saying something or people saying something over the PA as being the opposite end of the link trying to communicate. And they kept on trying to reset the link. So you'd come to the end of a sentence and all of a sudden it'd swear at you.
So now you have to realize the people in question who were coming to the end of their sentences were the other talent show competitors. And so there'd be people up there singing the MIT engineering fight song, and as soon as they were done, F you. Yeah, it was funnier than anyone at the talent show. These two computers stole the show. But that was the first year.
That was, and it set the tone for strange methods of doing communication at that point.
We'd both envisioned something like, routers and modems and all these things that you actually use to communicate. And here were people taking this entirely more creative track than anyone had dreamed. And so for the second year, there were 2 entries, double the number the first year. And one of them was done by Strider, who's in the other room, and one of them was done by Amish One.
Yes, I decided that there was only 1 entry in the first year, so I should add a second entry for the second year. So I'm going to go through and give the quick summary of what I did first, because frankly, it was less impressive. I built a system to push modem tones over VoIP. So it was modem data over voice over IP. This was not designed for efficiency. What it was a 300 baud acoustical coupler jacked into a standard POTS line phone, plugged into a computer running Asterix, comes out of an Ethernet link into a budget tone 100 SIP phone. I think there was one sitting over in the next room that somebody was playing with Slashtrix. See if I can mispronounce that correctly. Which was then jammed into an acoustical coupler, the style that you might have seen 10 years ago, that people would walk up to airport phones and just sort of clamp to the phone. So they could run
Velcros to the handset. It's great.
It's a wonderful thing. Which then came out of that and plugged into a 2400 baud modem. In fact, the first modem I ever was handed, purchased for me, birthday present when I was 10. Thing still works, 5-year warranty. They were serious. That thing still works. Okay, came out of that, and at this point, I've done something absolutely silly, but I felt like adding more links. So I ended up bouncing the entire connection, taking that serial link out, plugging it into an amateur radio TNC, into a radio, bouncing it off my car, which was sitting out in the parking ramp, to another radio and TNC combination, having it fall out of the serial port, and there's a terminal on the other. Then you type at one end, hit enter, and you'd watch it squeal, and then squeal on the radios, and eventually you'd see it show up on the other side. It worked. It was 300 baud. And latency that would scare you.
But it did work.
It did work.
We were typing back and forth from one end to the other, is this thing on? Is this thing on? Apparently so.
But of course, the moment we picked it up, because I constructed it in the next room and brought it over here, placed it in this room,
it failed to work.
It failed to work. My best guess right now is that using acoustical couplers in a room with amplified audio is not the best idea in the world. I could be wrong.
My personal guess is that Budgetone phone, which has, it's made in like Taiwanistan or something where they've never heard of RF shielding, and you plug the thing in, and as it boots, you hear it on your radio. You know, when you make a call, you hear it on your radio. I think that might have had something to do with the
When
ham.
you make a call, you hear it on your monitor.
Okay. I didn't know those were supposed to be audio output devices,
I
but
assure you, they aren't.
in Budgetone world, they are. So,
I had to put that thing 6 foot away from my monitor when I was using it. Otherwise, not only did I hear my monitor, but I also watched the screen go. And it's sort of like, ooh, that doesn't look happy.
yeah, you get what you pay for sometimes, hardware-wise. Anyway, the other entry was constructed by Strider, who's in the next room. And if he wants to wander over here, if somebody wants to invite him over here, I'd love to have him talk about last year's setup as well as this year's. But basically, where did it start?
Oh dear.
It started, you would punch a key on a keyboard.
There was a machine running some chunk of software he had written.
There were several machines running different chunks of software.
Okay, I'm going to start and see if I can relay this entire string, and I will probably lose a hop somewhere in here. And we'd call that packet lossage, but this wasn't packetized, so it didn't matter. Start out with the machine, type a message into it, hit enter. That machine would translate that message into a semaphore code, but not directly.
That was the fourth hop.
No, it actually went into a 5x5 grid to pull the letter. Then the machine would yell 2 names from Pokemon across an audio link to another machine which was doing audio recognition to pull the 2 Pokemon names out to find the grid coordinate in the semaphore square that he was choosing. From that, he then had that machine which interpreted that. Hey, he's here. You explain it.
All right, give the man a mic. He can have mine.
I don't
It doesn't
remember
like
the network fully from last year.
You should be recorded.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, for posterity or something.
Well,
Try stepping in front of the camera too, also for posterity.
ooh, cameras. Excellent.
And lights.
Well, anyhow, last year, the Anything But Ethernet competition, I partook in that and had some interesting things going on. This year, of course, the Semaphore Man is brought back. He's doing wigwag instead. Semaphore is a means of communication using flags on the end of your arm.
Get in
As
front of the camera.
I don't even know
Nate
the
is
letters,
doing?
but they're like 8 positions, like clock positions essentially, and the positions of the arms, you know, during wherever indicate the letters. And I can do that again if your camera missed it. But, the Semaphore Man, you have to go see. It's Lego motors and RC servos and cardboard, and it works.
Right. He still works. He was in the entry for this year, except using a different protocol. This year it's Wigwag, which is a single flag system of semaphore.
How does that work? Like left, right, or something like
Right.
that?
Some people use Morse code for it, with right being a dash and
That's
di.
neat.
But during the Civil War, the code that I'm using has something similar to Morse. So it's Vericode, but with different dits and dots. Of course, there was also the Lego printer last year. That took ASCII data over infrared. And from there, it had a built-in font, which took a lunch break to program. And it proceeded to print out characters quite nicely.
But you've missed how
About
quickly.
one character per minute, maybe?
Well, last year it was quicker because since it already had the font inside of it, it could skip the dots which weren't there and just fast forward to where it needed to be. And if there wasn't any further dots on that line, just proceed to the next line, like, semi-intelligent dot matrix or bubblejet type printers. It of course uses thermal paper with a glow plug as its print head.
Lots of RC gear in your setup.
Just a bit.
Couple servos, the glow plug.
Right. I was into model planes, still play with them occasionally, so I had that lying around. And most of the stuff in there is everything I had lying around. This year the printer is doing Hellschreiber instead of just printing ASCII characters, meaning the font is stored on the computer sending it data rather than in the printer itself, which gives you some problems with synchronization. Hellschreiber is a fax protocol where you're sending a single line